So Dr. Rob, do you like the new, we got, the format changed just a tiny bit. So weigh in on the background.
Well, you know me, I'm going to say you look great in blue, and I'm going to say I really like the orange with your outfit. I think they're
No,
great. I
but
think
the website is a lot crisper. I think it's a lot
the web
easier to read. So,
the website is still hard to see. I would probably
well,
put
it's better than it
a
was.
black
So
shadow around it. Or,
we'll
we can
see.
talk about it.
I'm
But
sorry. I thought this would be like, it looks great. What a good improvement. I
yeah,
should have
but you
known
know
better.
me, you know
Yeah,
me. But listen, here's the deal. We have 40 people here. If they have something to say about the background, they can drop us a
please.
note and we will
There you go.
improve it. Or they
We're
can
working
say
on it. So,
whatever they want to
yeah.
say.
Okay.
All right.
So I put in the answer, take a peek. My husband and I have been together 6 years, married for 2. He has a long-standing porn, fantasy, masturbation addiction of some 20 plus years, which I discovered 5 months ago. Our sex life is so ailing that at its worst, we went over a year without having sex or being intimate when I was pregnant with our first and only child. Usually we go months between having sex and almost always at my behest and leaves me feeling undesired. I feel my sexuality has been stifled and denied in my sexual. I think there's another piece to this. Oh, I'm going to hit, yes, there was a continuation. So in my sexual prime, 37, in his recovery plan, porn is inner circle behavior he's directly addressing. We have content blockers on all of his devices, and he's going to a local 12-step SAA group and seeing a CBT therapist. Masturbation to erotic recall, however, is a middle circle behavior that he tracks, but makes no substantive effort to control.
Well,
I told him, per the advice of a CSAT I've seen a few times, that if he doesn't give up masturbation and fantasy, at least in early recovery, oh shoot, there's more. Make these shorter, people.
I'll tell you what, I
Yeah.
understand enough to comment.
Okay, thanks.
So
Okay, thanks.
to you, the spouse, I would say, why would you feel sexually attracted to your husband or to anyone in this situation? You've just been lied to and cheated on. And for as long as not only as long as you've been in the relationship, but you didn't know who this person was when you married them because they were already keeping a lie. So on some level, your whole marriage is a lie. And I don't mean to say that, I just feel, I feel for as your child, because to be in a situation where you're so distant from the person who's supposed to be there right now to help your life is just really frustrating and sad. But you're not going to have a sex life because, and there's a number of reasons. I know what CBT is, and that's good, but it's really good therapy and it's the right therapy. However, that's cognitive behavioral therapy, which has a proven record of working with addiction. But the problem is if it's CBT and this person's experience is alcoholism, or if it's CBT and this person's experience is really deeply in people who steal, it's not going to help. And our clients are tricky. I actually, if I were treating alcoholics, I'd have to put myself in the mind of an alcoholic. Where would they go to drink? Where would I go to get the drink? Where would I? And so with these issues, if people don't have meaningful experience, they're not only not going to know what to do, they're not going to know how to probe it in a way that that is helpful. So here's one more. So I'm concerned about his therapy, and I absolutely agree with you. It's so, when I hear things like, well, my middle circle of masturbation is this because of that. And I just think, what a bunch of crap. I mean, either you, and I'm not saying that masturbation is bad. I'm not saying it's bad for him, but right now in the middle of all this and when you're not being sexual and you're not being intimate. So the things I just hit me right away is 5 months is really early. I don't think what you're being told or how it's going with your spouse is what's really going on. I think you're probably things you don't know about. And I'm concerned that with this particular therapist, you may never get where you want to get. Yeah. And the baby, I just feel terrible about that part. Anyway, Tammy, I've exhausted myself.
No,
Your turn.
I really do agree. And because what I hear is denial. Well, I'm putting this in my middle circle no matter what, no matter how negatively it's affecting your relationship. So to me, he's hanging on to addictive behavior. So I really agree with the CBT therapist that isn't trained for these specific issues? Has he been given, the battery of assessments so that the therapist really understands what's going on? And if they are just a CBT therapist, they don't have the access to that.
Well,
So
and excuse me, Tammy,
go
can
ahead.
they say the word masturbation? I mean, a lot
True.
of
Yeah.
therapists have no training in sexuality. Anyway, you really want, especially when you're married and kids are on the line, you want to have someone who is really doing their job. And we don't want to take that person away from you. But if you do need support, write us. Tammy, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm grateful that you have a support therapist who's qualified with this. So great, lean into that person. But Dr. Rob talks about this all the time. Why would you want to have sex with somebody who you don't trust? And if he's fantasizing, if he's having sex with himself and fantasizing about everything else, I can't imagine that you feel. Well, you even said, I don't feel good about it. I forgot exactly what you said, but it's like like your sexual connections don't leave you feeling wanted, desired, and good. It feels like it's more like, I'm going to try really hard to get this to work. You're doing all the work, and I don't hear that about him. It sounds like he's checking off a box. I say this often. I'm checking off the box. See, I'm seeing my CBT therapist. See, I've got porn in my inner circle, so I'm doing good. But yeah, so one more
Uh,
thing, hopefully your CSAT therapist is helping you set healthy boundaries. What do you need for your safety, for you and for your kiddo?
and I want to add something too, is like, I think, and this is true for so many partners, when you don't have any clue that this person you love has been lying to you, when it just never, when a lot of the things just came up, and you weren't expecting them, I think that many of you know that you've been having uncomfortable feelings for a while. And a lot of you will say, oh, that person's working, or they're busy, or we just had a child, or, you'll come up with many reasons to excuse this behavior, because why would you want to look at it? Why would you want to say, this person I love is hurting me? That would be the last on my list. So I wrote down two things I think spouses are challenged with. One is that you don't trust yourselves and what you feel, and you're far too likely to believe the person who's talking to you, even when it doesn't make any sense. And I hear a lot of, well, now that I look back, how could that have been going on? And the other thing is, on some level, I think you guys are you give us way too much permission. It's very hard for spouses to stand up for what's true for them. And when you do, we gaslight you, we confuse you, we lie to you. At a certain point, it's hard to know your own truth when you're getting so much of this from us. But if you trust yourself and you set really good boundaries, as Tammy said, that's what your responsibility is to yourself. Let's keep moving.
Okay, so the next one is in between the other. I am a male addict in recovery since February. My partner and I recently started listening to a couples healing podcast together. I feel that I am way more into it, interested in it, invested in it, and more attentive to it than her. I feel like she is not paying attention and drifts and dozes off during the podcast. Any advice on dealing with this? She chose the podcast.
Well, Tammy, do you want to start with that? I haven't thought about it, but I love hearing you first.
Well, yeah. So like I kind of wonder if this, I mean, it's interesting that she chose the podcast. Good that you're paying attention, and hopefully you're gaining skills to be able to do your relationship better, your life better. But I almost wonder if it's a defense mechanism for her. Like if it's like I mean, February, great, but here we are, it's December. So this is 10 months, and partners that see, significant change, it takes them a lot longer. So I almost wonder if this is kind of like a little insulator for her, where she's going like, I'm disconnecting because it's too much to even consider or even hope for. But I do think it's interesting that she chose the podcast in the first place. I guess I would also say, have you said, I in a nice, not confrontational way, but like, what are your reactions to this? What are you hearing? Are you seeing tools that we can use, to work on our relationship? Maybe it's a communication thing, an invitation for you to communicate, but not, I don't see you paying attention, but just invite a conversation. So that's my thoughts.
That makes me feel bad, because you have no idea how often I say to my husband, will you please pay attention? But we're not talking about these issues. I'm just saying it's all about me, of course. So there's a psychological piece to this, which Tammy, I thought, did a really good job. By the way, did y'all know that Tammy does consultations, and you can also
I
talk to
do.
her
Okay.
privately if you wish to. So anyway, I just wanted to say that because everyone wants to talk to Tammy. So there's a psychological component to this in my mind, and there's also a what do I do in a couple, to answer your second question. I don't know her. Tammy's never met her. People have all kinds of motivations for doing what they do. So, I don't want to undermine your relationship or devalue either one of you by making some opinion that is really the truth, because I don't know your truth. However, all that being said, this feels to me very passive aggressive. It's kind of like, fuck you, I'm going to make you watch this, but I'm just going to relax and take, you're the one who needs the help. I'm fine. And so why don't, but rather than saying it, it's kind of like, you fix yourself. And it feels like Tammy said, it feels like a message that she's getting a message to you, but without being direct. Whether the message is you have the problem, or I'm so mad at you, I don't want to pay attention to intimacy with you, you do it yourself. I don't know. But I agree, from a psychological perspective, there's something else there. However, from advice in dealing with this, have you talked to her about it? Have you sat down when you weren't fighting, when you weren't in the car waiting for the podcast, and said, there's something on my mind. I find this interesting and I'm growing, but I feel, and by the way, you might put it this way, but I feel really lonely doing this by myself. I feel really sad that we're not learning and on this journey together. I think you want to invite her in rather than saying, why aren't you? It's more, and this is the truth. You want to share this with her. And by the way, it is not your job to say, I know I'm not a therapist, but I really think it must mean you're angry. Okay, don't play therapist, but talk to her about what you'd like to see happen and how you feel. That's really the best answer that I think I can give.
Or are you just listening to the podcast too late? I poop out at nighttime.
Right.
Like I was super busy yesterday, and my husband was like 8 o'clock. He was thinking I'm going to be asleep by 8 o'clock, and I stayed till 9. But like there's just a certain time frame. I'm good in the morning. I'm horrible at night. So maybe it's like, could we listen to this at a different time so that we're not, or sit at the table and be
Sunday
interacting?
morning.
Yeah, I mean, could you change the logistics? But I think that's a conversation too.
Tammy, I love that you are pointing out the obvious, which is, I'm married to a man who, and I've known this for 15 years, there's a moment in the evening when I call it, he clicks off, which means his eyes are open and he's pretending, but he's actually already I can tell that the bed is calling him. And so part of that is by reading, that's the great thing about a podcast, by the way, you can do it 24/7. So yeah, change the time, but tell her why. Tell her why. Always, the more you say, the better, as long as you're coming from what you feel.
Yeah.
Let's keep moving
So
along.
somebody shared a comment. Thank you, Tammy, for the reminder of being baby steps. I hear you in my head. I'm sorry. That might be traumatic for you to hear me in your head, but thank you for sharing. So
I also hear you in
actually,
my
I was
head.
going to say, Rob,
I have
said
whole
that too.
conversations with you in my head. Actually.
Okay. All right. What does the Out of the Doghouse? Oh, this is great. When does the Out of the Doghouse course begin, and where do we find the link to register? It's on seekingintegrity.com. I will put it in the chat for you, but if you're listening to this via recording, then the group will start January 10th. It, like Sex Addiction 101 or Porn Addiction 101, are 6-week courses, 90 minutes, live facilitated, so you're not just watching videos, and they are specific material depending on the topic. So Dr. Rob, do you want to talk a little bit about what's going to be in the Out of the Doghouse? And I will put the link.
I think
will go find the link.
If I had to put a one word on what Doghouse is about, it's about empathy. I have, for a very long time worked with men who cheat or have cheated or sex addicts. It doesn't have to be all the way to sex addict. And I have to tell you, in 25 years of being licensed, Tammy laughs when I say this, I have never, and I mean never, encountered a guy who understood what kind of pain a woman goes through, well, when she has children, what kind of pain she goes to if she is betrayed. We say we do, and we feel bad, but we don't feel bad. We don't understand how bad you feel. And so I'll say men tend to lead with candy and flowers and that vacation you always want. And I'll watch the kids more often but please forgive me. And it's been 3 months, and that's not your timeline for healing is not theirs. And they often don't know how to say or act in the ways that would help you understand that they feel your pain. So I'll give you an example. When we do this, Tammy and I, and it's not just here in other places, I hear this. You guys write us this. I think my husband is sober and I really believe he's taking care of his recovery, but why is he still such a jerk? I hear that all narcissist, and that's because we can work our way out of the addiction. And I don't think out of the doghouse is the first thing people should do. I think sex addiction 101, if you're a sex addict. And by the way, the reason Out of the Doghouse is such a popular book, in my opinion, is because men want women to forgive them. And it's a book about how do I get her to forgive me? But it's really more about, let me explain what she's really going through. So anyway, the guys want to hear it live. We're going to give it to them live. And hopefully they'll learn to be more compassionate towards you a little bit at a time.
Okay, so I think this is a continuation of the previous ones, and we're going to skim over parts of it because there's more detail. But it said, should he move the masturbation and erotic recall to his inner circle, and what concrete strategies?
I think let's move on.
Okay. All right. So
thanks.
Okay.
D-Day.
Yeah. Okay. So then the next one is, this is from E. I've been in recovery since D-Day, May 2020. My brother was hit by a car last week and in the hospital with traumatic brain injury. Outlook is good. In the past, I would numb this out with pornography. And I'm trying to feel my emotions and share my pain and anxiety this time around instead of going to inner circle. My wife is supportive, and at the same time, this triggers her thinking, why am I more emotional now than when her betrayal was discovered? Could you please share any advice? Thank you. Wow.
Well, I think Tammy could state the obvious. And I'll ask her to. So Tammy, what seems very clear to you stepping back from this?
Yeah, you are in a different place. What I hear is somebody who's actually working on their recovery. You're able to show up differently. The other thing is this happened. This is external. You didn't cause this one, and you caused her pain. And so there's similarities in all of this, but it's different. I'm glad the prognosis is good for your brother, but you show up in a different way for other people. When you hurt your wife, then you're having to deal with all of that, and you had no recovery tools. Hopefully I hear that she's triggered, but hopefully it's also I'm learning to tolerate my pain and my struggles. I'm not perfect, but I'm working on it, and she sees that you're making some progress and can be hopeful for how that will shift in your relationship between the two of you as well. So
yeah, I would add that what happened to your brother, and I'm really, really sorry. I understand tragedy, trust me. It is out of the blue. You're his brother. You're going to be devastated, overwhelmed, and incredibly tearful, or whatever it is you are, obviously upset. And it's a single incident. This thing happened. It's like the sad drama and pain that's going on in Kentucky. All of a sudden, people aren't there anymore, and that's an immediate tragedy that's so easy to see right in front of you. But I was writing down that the effect of betrayal in a spouse goes on and on and on and on. It isn't like something happened and we're working to repair it. It will never go away on some level. It is a violation of the relationship that will never just disappear. And so actually it is more like your brother having that traumatic brain injury that is not going to heal. So I just think that spouses go through. So, and the other side of this, let me try the other side. Cami, how can I say this in a really respectful way? I think when people are in pain, they make a lot of things in the world about their pain. They see, for example, people aren't treated well. They might see a lot more unfairness. People who through violence might notice and see a lot more. So what she is going through is that pain is going to be compared to other situations. And there's one more thing. Our feelings have no time. So when I am devastated about the loss of a friend, and the sadness comes and the tears, they're actually tied to other people I've lost and other situations. It all comes together at the same time. And so what you are grieving is everything that's happened during this period of time and your relationship with your brother. It's different. I understand that your spouse believes that it's related to her reaction or your reaction then, but they're different things. Oh, there is one more thing. I'm sorry. Could I go on forever or what?
Well,
Um,
no.
Actually, go ahead. It's fine.
No,
I'll
no,
say it
no,
later.
no,
I'm
no, please,
sure.
no, please do, because yeah, you can't go on forever. We have an hour, so you can't go on forever. So that was all my.
Well, I think for spouses, it isn't just also this thing happened. It's them finding out that other things have happened that they didn't know about, and they feel violated in a way that isn't this just happened to me. It's more and more and more. It's like free fall as opposed to falling and hitting the ground. But anyway, Tammy, that was totally not worth our time. Whatever I just said. Let's move on.
Okay, so now the C, go to that one. I've been digging out about myself and I discover that I may have ADHD. Is there a correlation with me being an addict? Do you have any data with this?
This is such a great question, Tammy, because we actually have data on this. And I think Ken Adams talks about this when he works with the
No,
CSATs.
Todd Love. I did a
Oh,
webinar with Todd Love and I will find the link on this, but yeah, ADHD there's a huge correlation. It isn't,
20%.
yes, I was gonna
That's
say, it
actually
isn't
the
that
amount.
everybody that has ADHD is gonna be a sex addict or another form of addiction, but there is a higher correlation within, if you're an addict, there's a little more probability with that, but it's
Well,
super important to address it. Todd Love did the webinar, and like I said, I'll go dig that out in a minute, but he talked about the life expectancy of a male, this is research based, is 11 years less, or was it 13? I can't remember now. If you're like untreated and don't attend to this. So this is really important stuff. And a treatment center that would just go stop all of those meds, is not
my
helpful
handy
either.
person is now here, but let me
Okay.
say something really quickly. 1 second about this, which is ADHD is a disorder in part about being impulsive. Like I see this and I just go do it. And why did I do? Oh, now I'm going to do this thing over here. And so if you have addictive issues, it plays into it because it's harder to say, I'm not going to do this, or should I do this? Because you're already banging across the walls with regular issues. So, okay, Tammy, I got to go do this. I'll be back.
So so I just put the link to the webinar, and I'm also going to find he did a podcast with Dr. Rob on sex, love, and addiction. So I'm also going to put the link on that, but Dr. Todd Love. So we have Troy Love, who does a number of groups and webinars on our site. And then there's Dr. Todd Love, who is really an expert on the ADHD aspects. That was an area of focus. So I've given you in the chat links to both of those, and you can check that out. But I'm sure he's got all kinds. I mean, I think he wrote a dissertation about that or something. So Dr. Todd Love would be an expert on ADHD and addiction. But you'll hear both in the podcast and on the webinar link that I gave you as well. So anyway, so let's see. Hopefully those are useful for you, but addressing that, I mean, I have a mild form of it. I won't show you my desk, but if you saw it, it's like I had to learn coping mechanisms. I have post-it notes, I have reminders. I had to do those things in order to be able to, manage life as successfully as I can at the moment. But those are tools that I can use and lean into, but they're, for some medication, we've had clients where they needed that foundation of medication just to put them the ability to, stay focused. And I don't remember the correlation. there was some clients have both ADHD and OCD. So, getting a qualified professional, not your just general GP doctor, getting a true analysis of that, particularly from someone who understands addiction, because otherwise, if you're using the addiction and they don't know about it, that's a problem too. So hopefully those are all useful. Someone says, I need research. I read research articles that found that the effects of addiction on the brain results in attention issues. That is interesting. And I would say that is true. And I think we learn in recovery, to settle in, like the one person, shared too, settling into being able to tolerate emotions. Particularly, I see with gaming and porn addiction, because there's so many images and it's so fast, that it changes, things. So it's more difficult. Something like alcohol, is more of a sedative. So I'm not sure, but I do find often, and this is just my experience, so no research on it, but that people are looking to self-medicate. It is why some people are using whatever chemical or whatever form of addiction they're using, is to, I can focus on porn, I stay focused on this, so that settles my ADHD in a maladaptive coping mechanism way. So, okay, so we're gonna go. Somebody said test, I see that, but that doesn't, okay. All right. So is it possible with a person whose wife doesn't understand his grief, he is feeling emotions now rather than acting out? Possibly, but I think it's probably not able to understand how he's able to do this in this situation, but a year ago or whenever is, well, he's learned more and it's different. Because they are different. So would you please address the specifics of why someone whose addiction includes porn and serial infidelity that is primarily based in masturbation while sexting, camming, exchanging pics, should stop solo masturbation, at least in early recovery? Because that's still part of the acting out. Let's see, I have to find that now. Why? That would be, well, it's like and I've actually heard this, it's like the alcoholics that are going, oh, I'm just going to drink this, or, oh, I'm just going to smoke cannabis now because, like my problem is alcohol, it's not this. Any of this stuff. So let's start talking about, I mentioned dopamine a minute ago. Any of that is still going to trigger the dopamine. Dr. David Fawcett does a great job talking about, smoking and vaping. We're a non-smoking, non-vaping facility, because otherwise, guess what? That dopamine stays online. So if this person actually really wants to change, it's stopping all problematic behaviors, that, it isn't just stopping the most problematic. I know some people get into the harm reduction and it's like, oh, that one's the worst. But if they're all keeping that dopamine going, guess what? Then it's just the cycle of like, well, I'm not doing this now, but I'm going to do that. I kind of call it the garbage can addiction, where I can't do this, so I'm going to do that. And now I can't do that one, so I'm going to do this. And so I'm going to do whatever is available, not my favorite is this, but that one, oh, I promised I wasn't going to do that, or whatever, or I can't, I'm at work, and so I can't, go, I can't leave the building, or whatever it is. So, I think I go back to the person that asked earlier too, the husband still wants to do this, to erotic stuff. What is the goal? Is the goal to be happy, joyous, and free, which is what we're promised, through a 12-step programs, if we actually do recovery? Or do we want to keep hanging on to some behaviors because they might come in handy? And I can't imagine really giving up everything, which just leads to the, ongoing spinning and cycling. I hear often from people who oh, well, I'm not really ready for treatment. I can't do that yet or whatever. And then they call me 6 months later and things are worse. And I'm going, well, of course they get worse. If you don't change, then things continue to spiral out of control. You hurt more relationships, you lose a job. Some people have, with porn, they downloaded an image and the FBI shows up on their doorstep. I mean, things get worse, but in our addict brain, we pretend that they won't. Um, so, and I don't know if this was written from the loved one or the addict, but if let's say it's from the addict, if you want to change, if you want to have life differently, you know, I still go to 12-step meetings, and if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, you need to do what you need to do. So Dr. Rob, in the answered, we talked about, would you please address the specifics of why someone whose addiction includes porn and serial infidelity that is primarily based in masturbation while sexting, camming, exchanging pics should stop solo masturbation, at least in early recovery? So what are your thoughts on that one?
I have to read it. But here, by the way, this is what was wrong with my refrigerator.
Oh, that looks like something that might be important.
Well, it's expensive, I'll tell you that. Marriage for two as long as didn't we? I'm sorry. This is the last one. I got a little lost.
It was the 617 one. It came in at 617.
Oh, I see.
So looking, yeah. So
17. Oh, it's 617 for you. Why someone whose addiction includes porn and serial infidelity, masturbation, well, why should someone, okay. So I think this is a question about what defines sex addiction on some level, and how do you figure out what is healthy and what is not? And I think that someone cannot figure out whether they're an alcoholic or not and really understand it if they're still drinking wine. They can be drinking whiskey and vodka and whatever it is, and decide to stop that and just drink wine. And the problem is that they need to experience themselves without any of that, at least for a period of time. It's amazing how many people come in to see us, well, men in the program, and they say, porn is my problem. That's the issue, porn. But they don't mention or don't see that seeing the sex workers and going to the strip clubs and hanging out in the massage parlors are part of the problem, because they are only looking at the part that got them in trouble, or they're only looking at the part that seems to be an issue, but they're not looking at all of their sexuality. And I think the only way to really address that and pick out the healthy pieces from the unhealthy pieces, is by really stopping for a period of time and then beginning to pick those out. I also can say briefly, as a sex addict, that I had spent so many years, and here you have serial infidelity, being seductive. Everywhere I went, what a lot of how I lived in the world was, is someone going to want me? Are they going to desire me? That's how I decided what to wear during the day. That's how I decided what kind of clothes to buy. That's how I decided what gyms to go to, was based on who would desire me the most. And to put all of that down meant that I just had to look people in the face or look down. But I was with complete sobriety, I wasn't dipping into that well at all. And I got to learn who I was in the world when I wasn't dressed seductively. When I wasn't, I got to see that because I wasn't acting out at all. So bottom line is, Tammy, we just worked with someone who said basically that there were drugs that were being used, but that they weren't a problem, therefore they weren't part of sobriety. And it doesn't really matter whether that particular thing is causing the problem or not. Anyway, I'm going to hand that to you because you're going to.
no, I already talked about it, but including like smoking, vaping, and everything. So it's like, at the end of the day, what do you really want? And if you want to continue to be an active addiction, you're going to keep doing all of those little things that keep you from being able to be happy, joyous, and free. So, okay. Next question.
That's a lot easier answer than mine was.
Okay, so the next question, and I'm hearing an echo. I don't know if you hear the echo, but I don't know.
He's going to give me an invoice, so that's just okay.
Okay. As a betrayed spouse, my main emotion is intense anger. I'm mad at so much. D-Day was a year ago, disclosure a couple months ago. What should or can I do to process my anger? What I don't hear, like, and I get this, this is, well, so here's the thing I figured out in my journey was for me, anger was useful because what I really felt was hurt, and I hate feeling hurt. And so I liked anger because it was an outward thing. And I'm not saying you like anger, but it just like it took me a while, big shock, to understand that if I was angry and intense, including rage, like that was an outward and power. And then I didn't have to feel the horrible hurt. And so one of the things I had to learn to do was be okay with, experiencing the hurt. You have grief, you have loss, you have hurt. I don't know what, you said you went through disclosure. So I'm presuming that you have a qualified support therapist that you are working with. And it is, it is digging through the grief and the loss. Dr. Rob mentioned, and this can happen too, that those layers get, kind of crunched together. So when you're feeling this, intense pain, it's tapping into something deeper. So here's another thing. This feels like overshare Tammy night. Sorry, but hopefully at some point it's useful. So one of the things that I discovered on my journey was that if I was feeling really angry, I used to have this thing that I called my white hot rage, and it felt like it came out of nowhere. And what I learned was A, it was hurt, but B, it really was an abandonment wound. I had this wound. And so I learned with a very good therapist how to go back and help support the young girl who felt abandoned at a certain age. Like I did the work. And I have to tell you that for that issue, because the white hot rage was not serving me well. And once I did the work on that, including some EMDR, but which is trauma therapy, if you guys haven't heard that. But once I did that, I have not ever experienced that again, like in that form. Do I get angry? Sure. But not that rage that was, I knew it was hurtful to me, but it also kept me distance from people. Like there was a situation where, it came up and, like I made myself distant from other people because I was afraid that what I would say or do would be really hurtful to relationships that I cared about. And like analyzing the situation, I know exactly what happened. I felt alone and abandoned, and everybody else was together and blah blah blah. But having the gift of being able to look at that differently. So a long-winded answer for it's addressing what's going on underneath. The anger is real, and sure, your whole world has been thrown up. I'm not diminishing that at all. But I also hear you wanting to move through it. How do I process my anger? It is owning it, but also looking at what's underneath it. What is this, picking into? And, if there's some specific, trauma that is bumping up against, can you do some, EMDR processing? I've also heard about brain spotting. I haven't done it yet. I actually want to. But brain spotting sounds like a more focused aspect of dealing with something. It's like EMDR extra, so there may be some ways to process through that. Eddie Caparucci did a webinar and kind of talked about it, if you're hanging on to things. So how can you learn to let go of the anger, and process it differently. I think a lot of it is what does this mean to me? What is it really bumping up against? So hopefully that's somewhat helpful. Okay, next question is, let's see. I just lost it. Oh, here it is. How do you deal with being disgusted by sex addiction husband at times. It's just like sometimes I feel sick to my stomach from him touching me. I don't want to be this way, but I can't stop it. Is there anything I can do to get away from this? Well, this sounds like, um, okay, so I would invite you to be in he has to ask you before he touches you. Like this feels like it's way too early, that you guys are not in we can do this yet. Of any form of touching. I mean, I don't know, what kind of touching, but like early on, and until there is trust and until you feel safe and not disgusted, like it should be, well, I don't want to use should and shouldn't. I would encourage you to consider it be, the deal is, I need, for my safety, for my boundaries, if you want to touch me, if you want to hug me, if you want to whatever, the I need you to step in and ask, ask before you touch, because then you can go, yeah, I won't feel good about this. It's feeling manipulative or whatever. So I would invite you to have a strategy where you say, I need some space with that. So topic of ADHD, since he left with it. So Dr. Rob had already addressed the ADHD. So please, so probably no, but please do. So somebody's asking in the chat, you're muted, if you can collaborate more about ADHD. I gave them both Dr. Todd Love's podcast with you and the webinar, and you had already mentioned like 20%. So do you have anything else to go back on that topic?
Well, just really quickly is that I'm married to someone who has ADHD. And for the first 3 or 4 years of our relationship, neither one of us knew that. And so my husband would come home and he would start the dishes and then he'd leave them all over the place. And he'd take his clothes off for the evening and they'd be in a trail behind him. And then he'd start dinner and then forget half of in other words, he would go from thing to thing to thing. And for me, I grew up in a kind of icky house. So for me, a clean home is really important. And he knows that. So when the dishes kept piling up in the sink and the laundry kept sitting around in a trail, and I started to get really angry, like, if you loved me, you would do these things. If you loved me, you would, because it came tied to, you understand this is important to me, you cleaning up whatever it is. And even if you don't want to, you're doing it for us, for me. And I can see that our relationship got to the point where we really had to look at this. And what we found out was he had ADHD. And so when he went on medication, all of a sudden, he remembered that he hadn't finished the dishes. All of a sudden, he saw the trail of clothes. And it was really, it's amazing when something is so medical and you really see the difference. It saved our relationship. And just to say to any of you who have this issue, there's some really good books on how to live with or love someone with ADHD or ADD. And they talk about how to support each other with finding things or losing things or finishing projects. I have to say this time, you don't know this about John, and I forgot about it really over all these years, but I can't tell you how many projects he started that he didn't finish, how many things he bought, like, oh, let's get those roller skates, or, oh, let's get that, and then did it for a few weeks and never did. And I would say, boy, you just like to spend money, and then you drop. It's like it was a personality thing, and it was really an ADD thing. Like, oh, that looks good, I'll do that. Oh, no, that looks good. And it is the nature of the disorder. So anyway, maybe some folks learned from that. It was very powerful for me in my life.
Well, and that it's not, I think that, it's not personal to you,
Well,
so
everything. That's the problem.
No, but, I mean, I have mild ADHD, so I kind of can do all of that too. And, my husband is he's he's middle of the road. He's just really stable. And so, I can do this. Now in recovery, I do this. In addiction, I was all over at the ends of the pendulum. So, but, and I don't need medication. I was low enough grade. I don't need that, but I had to learn tools and tricks to be able to,
right,
complete things, because if something has my attention, it really has my attention. If it's like, it's harder to dig in and focus. So
Tammy, I've never known you to have one thing have your attention, mostly 7 or 8 things have your attention. But let's go back to our work.
okay. So My family have noticed my wife is depressed, feeling down, and have started asking questions. Is it a good idea to tell them I cheated on her and we are working things out?
Okay. So I think that there could be no worse thing than to go up to someone who is unexpecting this and or is not expecting something like this and to drop it on them. I think if you want to devastate someone that you love, it's not just what you did, but it's the respect or the way you show the beginning of talking about it. And the other thing is that once, what if she has a little depression? What if she has a little anxiety? What if she's not seeing a therapist? What if she needs support and it's not there? I have seen spouses, I don't mean to say this so directly to any of you, but not want to live after they found this out. And so, and the other piece is that it'll make, and you do need to talk about it at a certain point. This is absolutely something I would do with a professional, especially if there's already issues coming up and the questions are coming at you. By the way, she already knows something and she is trying to trust her own feelings. I talked to you guys before. She's pressed down and she's asking questions. That means she already has a sense that something isn't right and it's related to this. So, you got to get to a professional and get to work. Yeah, Tammy. Oh, one more thing. The person who cheats, when we tell you everything, we feel so much better. Oh my God, I got that off my chest. And now it's not a lie and it's not a secret. Of course, we've knocked you to the floor, but we feel a sense of relief because we're not carrying secrets around anymore. So, Tammy?
So did you answer my family has noticed my wife is depressed and is feeling down, and should we tell them?
Oh,
I was
tell
gonna say, I don't think,
them.
yeah, tell them. Yeah.
Well, that's
So
a great answer for telling her.
yeah, I was gonna
I
say, I
don't know
don't think
what,
you answered the tell them.
but I
So
liked my answer.
I like your answer for the other question.
Okay, so I don't think, well, I don't know who family is or who you're referring
It
to
says
that you
my
would
family.
tell.
So I'm kind of thinking, the extended family.
Yeah, well, I don't think that your sex life is anyone's business. If you're working with a therapist, that's great. Um, Whether it's children or parents or people you're going to see regularly at Thanksgiving or Christmas, you have to remember you can't unsay something. So once they, and by the way, everyone will know because they all talk to each other. So I would question my need to tell them that. We kind of had little boundary circles around who are we closest to, and those people know everything about us, and then who is safe for most things, but we don't. And then there's the world, So to me, this sounds like the very safest people talking about this. And I'm not sure that telling your family is going to lead you to them to feeling safe or you to feeling safe. I was going to say a couple other things. We have a lot of clients whose brothers, sisters, parents find out that you have an impulse problem with sex, and then they don't want you around their kids because they're afraid that, oh, what does that mean? And that must mean sex offending. And it can also produce really real problems in the family. So I would not tell them anything other than Mary and I are really struggling with some issues, and we haven't been feeling good about each other, but we're really working on it. And if you see that, don't take it personally. It's about us, and that's about all I would say to anybody. It isn't any of their business. If you were having trouble having an orgasm, would you go to your mom and say, So anyway, that's
Yeah, well,
the
and
answer.
I agree, because at Christmas you may be sitting next to them, but it's also what I have too often heard is the divisive. It's like the family starts taking sides, and it isn't supporting the couple, or and it could be either one of you, but it ends up being divided. Like, oh well, if she had only done whatever, eh, then you wouldn't have cheated. Well, or vilifying you. There's a problem. You guys are working on it. It's okay to say, we're struggling. We're we're getting professional help. We're working on it. We ask you to give us some grace at this time. Okay.
By the way, in 90% of the cases, the kids will say, you hurt our mom. And they will stand behind mom because you did what you ever did and it hurt. So it leaves you, it's very difficult, as Tammy said, to balance and get everyone like, leave us alone so we can work on our relationship if that's what you want to do, because the kids are saying, I don't think you should be together, or whatever it is they're saying. Tammy?
Or I had one last week where there were 3 kids, 2 of them sided with one and one sided with the other. So now the sibling, like
Now they're
he's
not
just
talking to each.
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So it, yeah, it like,
It could be a hot mess, as Tammy would
yeah,
say.
yeah, you don't know where it's gonna go, and it just doesn't like need to be, that the kids know. So, okay, or family. Okay, next one. As a betrayed partner, oh, I wanted you to comment on, so to, the 631. How do you deal with being disgusted by the sex addiction husband at times? It's just like sometimes I feel sick to my stomach from him touching me. I don't want to be this way, but I can't stop. Is there anything I can do? And I did address it, but I would like to have your input on that as well too.
Well, I think that you have to, the most important thing is that you tell him, but maybe not in those words. I wouldn't say I'm disgusted with you, because that makes it very difficult for their own self-esteem, no matter what. But I would say, I'm feeling very uncomfortable, considering what's happened. Would you mind sleeping in the other room? If there is another room, or out on the couch, or maybe with your brother for a while. I need some space to work through this for myself. Um, I don't think there's anything you can do to get away from it except time and some therapy. But one thing that I would think about is, if you have this strong a response, it may have some things to do with other things that have happened to you. I've heard people who have been molested or abused
Mm,
or neglected, and these kinds of things happen, like the cheating, and all of that comes flooding up. And now they're not just angry about that, they're angry that anyone ever betrayed them. So, there's two things. One of which is, you have to talk to him about how you're feeling and what you're worried about, and what's happening between you. And the other thing is that you should probably get into some sort of support, so you can look at, does this ring a bell from things in the past? So you probably said all that, Tammy, but
I said along those lines, and I also said, like, if he's touching you, like, it's okay to say, you need to ask me before you touch me, to have that, like that safety boundary for you. So, okay. So the next one we answered. So we're going to skip to the bottom. Is
I got it.
commitment phobia a different issue, or is it part of sex addiction?
No, you skipped one. As a betrayed partner, my main
Yeah,
main
we
emotion is
just
intense
we,
anger.
we did the intense anger.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Is
So
commitment phobia a different issue, or is part of sex addiction? Um, so sex addiction is an intimacy disorder. It is a disorder about connecting with people, and how we perceive those connections, and how we maintain those connections. And we are intimacy avoidant. We have no problem having sex with 100 people, but when we get really close to people, that's when we don't have as much control. And that's when we can get into trouble. So, is commitment phobia a different issue? It's more like this, I would say, that sex addicts actually, for the most part, we are able to commit, but we're not fully there. We make a commitment, but we're out doing this and out doing that. And so we're half into our commitment and half not. Excuse me. Um, I think many of us sex addicts are commitment phobic as well, but commitment phobia is a much bigger issue. It's like saying, is depression a separate issue or a part of sex addiction? Well, a lot of sex addicts are depressed, but so many people are depressed that it wouldn't be something I would directly tie to sex addiction. And yes, many of us get in commitments and then run from them, or we have difficulty creating them.
So the next question is, how can we spouses find good EMDR therapists? Many of the trained therapists that work with betrayal trauma, or CSATs that are working with the addict, because addicts, trust me, can benefit from EMDR as well, are trained for that. So my first choice, or for a suggestion for you, would be to get a qualified therapist that already understands these issues and also does EMDR. But EMDR, they have a website, emdria.org, emdria.org, that lists everyone. So, but get someone who's actually trained. There'll be some people who, aren't certified, and they'll have it on Psychology Today or whatever, that they can do EMDR. You want it's like all of this stuff. You want the real people, not the ones that are going, oh, I can help you with that. So that would be my suggestion for you.
And I thank you, Tammy, because, and I wrote Tammy's email address up there because we do make a lot of referrals and recommendations for folks. And if that's ever helpful to you, we're glad to do it. Let me see, there was one other thing I wanted to say about. I have to tell you, when I have work people coming in and out, I get so lost, Tammy. Okay.
So we've got one more question and we've got time for that one. Okay, are you ready
Oh,
for
I want
that?
to say one more thing. So
Okay.
EMDR.
Mhm.
EMDR is not, so I'm going to have a few EMDR therapists who are going to probably be angry at me for me saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway. EMDR is a technique.
Mhm.
It is a technique like psychodrama or art therapy, and there are people who are trained, for example, here at Loyola University, they do an art therapy master's program, and those people are often in facilities and programs where there's a bunch of people and they're doing art therapy on a regular basis, but it's part of something larger. So with EMDR, if I was a therapist who had the skill set of doing it, then I might pull it out of my toolbox to work with you if I felt it was useful. But if I don't have any experience or training in the EMDR, I'm going to send you out to see someone who is trained, and then you'll still be seeing me, but maybe for a couple of weeks you'll just be working with them, and then we will coordinate. So I think it's more like you can have a professional who knows it, or you can have a professional who doesn't, and then they will refer to you, if they don't know what they're doing, to an expert. Or you can write Tammy at seekingintegrity.com and it will all get magically solved for you.
Won't magically solve, but I'll do my best. Okay, so the last question, how difficult is it for an essay to overcome a 50-year habit of masturbating through fantasy? He's sober from porn and fantasy for 3 months now, and we have not been sexually intimate. Is there hope for us to have a restored sexual relationship?
So I'm confused exactly about what the questions are. Can you maybe boil that down? Because it seems like more than one.
So I think this is a betrayed partner who's looking for hope. Can someone who has a 50-year habit change? Can there be hope for them for their relationship?
Well, first of all, addicts are not, addiction is not a habit. So, a habit is something you can stop, you can change, you can eliminate. It doesn't work for you. It's not shaming, it's not embarrassing, to me, I'd be curious about, and I can't judge this person from here. Do they masturbate 2 or 3 times a year? Do they masturbate once a month? Does it have consequences? Or are they masturbating 3 hours a day? It really depends on how the masturbation is affecting their life. If it's something that my spouse strongly objects to, then it is affecting my life and I need to talk to them about it. And so if it would have hurt you or you would have disagreed with it all that time ago, and they've hidden it from you, that sounds very addictive. I was going to say something else. A 50-year habit, I'd wonder how old this person is, because 50-year habit, they're already maybe in their 60s, something like that. And it is very hard to get from 0 to 100 when you're already, we're not seniors, we're elders. So, I often say to the guys who are 30, I'm so glad you're here at this point, because you have less time to get this done if you're already older. So, is there hope for you out of a restored relationship? He has to be doing a lot of work. The one thing Tammy, I'm sure, would say is, does he go to 12-step meetings? Is he seeing a therapist that's trained? Are you getting the support you need? Because this is a process that what we do in healing these issues, both the addiction and also partnerships. And it really has certain steps that need to be taken. That's why we're trained in it. So I would say, if you were put on the right road with the right people, absolutely. And it's always amazes me, and I don't know if you, Tammy, when we get, and we do, someone who's 67 in treatment or someone who's 72 come to Seeking Integrity, because it makes me realize that they want to be clean inside and outside of themselves, no matter how old they are. And I really admire you elders who are like me getting help. Did you know that we're elders now, Tammy?
Sure, let's go with that. So this
Okay.
is not like, you're way more accepting of the age thing than I am. So like just let's go there. So, but yeah.
Well, and then this show will have to delete, but
Yeah,
thank
no,
you
it's
so
all
much.
good. Yeah,
Thank you,
it's
Tammy,
all good.
for your hard work. Oh, by
Thank
the way, I have
you.
to say
Yeah.
one more thing. Did you know that our podcast numbers, doubled this week? We now have 7,000 people who downloaded last week, and it's because we have new podcasts. So I guess I'm gonna have to do more and more often, is the
That's
thing.
what let's see who's been encouraging you for that.
Well, I'll
Anyway.
interview you a few times. All right. Y'all
Good
have a
enough.
good night. I'm gonna go have
So
something
can you
to
call
eat.
me? Well, no, call me quick about that other thing. Okay. Bye,
Okay, you got
everybody.
it. Bye, everybody.